Hey everybody, Tactic Angel here, playing some World of Warships Legends on the PlayStation 4, and today I want to update some of my tips for beginners. I know I put out a video in the beta, and if you've watched that, then thank you, and also, kind of sorry. Some of this is going to be a little bit of a repeat, but what I thought I'd do is a series of at least 3 videos to kind of get everybody up to speed on the basics, rather than just a video that isn't more or less how not to suck so bad. Plus, the audio in that video is kind of crap. So anyway, half of this is probably going to be familiar, half of it is going to be new, and thanks to people who left me comments, your input has helped me make these sections better, I hope. Anyway, I'm going to start with survival, because I find that I have more fun in games where I'm not dead. So even if you're a broken clock in a boat, if this can help you stay alive just a little bit longer, then maybe you'll be right a few more times per day, and other confusing analogies. So number 1, don't drive in straight lines. If you've watched more than one of my videos, you'll probably hear this just too many times. Don't drive in straight lines. But Tactic Angel, you don't drive a ship. Well, whatever, sir. You're playing boats. Make sure that your boat is not going in the same direction at the same speed for long periods of time when you're likely to be taking damage. For one, it's the best method to be hit by a torpedo, and you also make it pretty easy for people who are shooting guns at you to really dial in their shots and hit you. So you want to vary your speed, change your heading from time to time. Something other than a stair step is best. Be a little bit random. That'll help you live longer. As a special caveat, if you're driving all alone and you have that spotted logo with the ship next to it up there, you need to understand what is happening to your life. You, sir, in your big beautiful battleship or deadly cruiser, have just passed from predator, or whatever else you think you were, to prey. Now don't panic immediately, because unless you're right next to an island, that probably just means somebody at sea has seen you, so they're probably still a ways away. You can continue driving in a straight line if you need to for a little bit longer, but you are going to want to start thinking dodge. You can start dodging immediately, you can start dodging in 5 or 10 seconds, but understand that torpedoes are probably coming towards you, and you want to do at least a little something to make sure that you're not an easy target. So you see, the theme here is that really the best way to dodge torpedoes is to start before you can see them. And that's kind of the whole point of not driving in straight lines, because let's say something has gone just horribly wrong. As a little pointer, if you have to slow down suddenly, obviously slow down. But turning also helps to slow down your ship. So my general advice is, if you really need to lose a lot of speed quickly as possible, do a full reverse, and then turn away from the threat, usually, but sometimes it might actually make more sense to turn towards it, particularly if you're already kind of angled towards the torpedoes that are coming at you. Keep in mind, as you're swinging this boat around, there's some lag, so sometimes you need to lay off the rudder before you think it's necessary. You'll lose the speed. If you need to continue the turn, you're going to need to throw on the gas again to complete any turns you start like that, but it's going to be something that you're going to learn in time. And I put a lot of emphasis on dodging torpedoes as a new player, because torpedoes are really going to be really quite dangerous in the first 2 or 3 tiers, because you don't really have as many tools to deal with them, and you're not experienced enough to know how to deal with them. Number 2, have a buddy, or in other words, don't run off and die alone. I cannot emphasize this enough. Unless you really know what you're doing, you don't want to wander off into the ocean, because if you do, you're probably not going to like what you find there. Combined arms is kind of the name of the game here. Trying to get as many guns on as few number of targets that can return fire as possible is how games are won in World of Warships. If your entire team wanders off in one direction and then you go sailing off in the other, really the only thing you're going to do is probably get killed. And at best, you'll walk away with the limited and certainly not provable sense that you're the smartest person on your team. The prize for that is that you're still dead. So let's talk about broadsides. There's no ship in the game that isn't at least 4 times as long as it is wide. Presenting your broadside to a target is an invitation for all manner of terrible things to happen to you. Shells in World of Warships have a certain penetrative power. It is measured against your armor wherever that shell hits. If it hits you square in the side, you're not going to be presenting the best possible armor to your enemy. So let's talk about presenting an angle then. If you are angled, you benefit from 2 things. One, it's a little bit more difficult to tell exactly where to shoot you. Actually, at some angles, it's darn right tricky unless you've really been playing this a lot. The second is that your armor is actually effectively thicker. This isn't going to help you in every ship you have, certainly not destroyers, and there are several lightly armored cruisers. The ones that I have described in the game as delicate little flowers like the Iwaki or the Danae. The other part about presenting an angle is that every bit of your ship is turned towards or away from your enemy from a broadside, and that is just a little bit less profile for your enemy to actually shoot at. If you're one of the more well-armored cruisers or battleships in the game, presenting angles does mean that, like World of Tanks, shells might actually bounce off of you. It might also shatter, which means you'll take only a small amount of the potential damage of a shell. Angles between 60 and 70%, depending on what's shooting at you, may bounce all of the shots that hit that particular piece of armor. That doesn't mean you're not going to take any damage, certainly because if you get hit in the superstructure, that's probably going to go through anyway, but you do have a good chance of mitigating a lot of damage if you do practice good angling. Arguably, the best way to avoid damage is to turn the front of your ship directly towards your enemy. You'll provide the smallest profile to hit this way, and you stand a decent chance of taking a shot on the bow. Now, if you have some armor, the angle, and the curve of your ship's bow should deflect the shell. This isn't going to help if you're in those delicate flowers out there, because the shell might be big enough that it just goes straight through you. So if you're in that kind of ship, the reason why you're going to do this isn't so much to bounce shots, but to make yourself a smaller target. So turning in versus turning away. You're going to get a similar benefit if you turn away from your enemies as you would if you turn towards them. And that's just because your ship is always going to be as wide as it is, no matter how you look at it. But the back of your ship is predictably usually not as well armored. Most battleships will manage some bounces, particularly from smaller ships. Some cruisers too, but you definitely shouldn't expect it. Obviously, destroyers, this doesn't apply at all. If you find yourself suddenly alone, this is usually because, like me, maybe you aren't paying as much attention as you should. You have to consider your options. Sometimes running away is a good option, because maybe you're so slow that backing up isn't an option. Ships go about half as slow backwards as they can go forwards. Some ships like the Wyoming, the Ishizuchi, and the New York actually have more guns that can fire backwards while still presenting good angles. I know when I was new, I spent a lot of time turning in when maybe I should have been turning away. Every kilometer you drive closer towards the enemy makes it easier for them to hit you, and if you're outgunned, running away is a good option. Consider it. It doesn't feel good at first, but running away is often the smart idea. Check the mini-map. So it occurs to me that I might have mentioned not paying attention. It happens to all of us, but just like a teenager learning to drive, that mini-map is like your rear view mirror. Also, consider that you have several seconds between shots with destroyers, you have even more time with cruisers, and you have sometimes 30 seconds, 45 seconds in some battleships. You need to get in the habit of looking up at that mini-map, because you're never going to be able to master the subtle art of not slamming face first into an island, or whether or not you have a buddy unless you do, because paying attention to the mini-map, if you see yourself without support, realize that, and make sure that you have a good reason to be without a buddy, because otherwise you probably want to turn around and sail towards some friendlies. Your mini-map's going to show you some things, so you're going to see this white circle around your boat that tells you the maximum range of the weapon that you're using on your ship. If you have both guns and torpedoes, this range is going to change when you switch back and forth between them. So your mini-map is also useful for telling if you're going to be able to hit a ship or not with your guns or torpedoes. Now keep in mind, particularly when using torpedoes, that your torpedoes are In most cases, no faster than twice as fast as your average ship. So if a ship is running away from you, by the time that your torpedoes get to that white line, there is a chance that someone has somehow moved out of your range. There's also this little blue line though, and that line is telling you your default detectability by sea. You can be spotted outside of that range. Understand that. Though it's not very often. And this range will increase if you fire your guns. It will not increase if you launch torpedoes. For battleships, these lines are fairly close to one another. They might actually completely overlap, but usually they'll be pretty close to one another. They tend to be a little bit further away when you're in a cruiser, and if you have a destroyer, you're going to see an even wider gap. The reason this plays into survival is because you don't actually have to shoot your guns in order to earn points in this game. If you're capturing a base as a destroyer, oftentimes the smarter thing to do is not alert people to your presence. Yes, they'll know you're in the cap because they can see the cap being capped, but if you hold your fire and just spot for your team or just sit in the capture area where no one can see you, you're scoring points. If you do decide to shoot, your sea detectability will be at least as large as the gun range on your ship. It'll take 20 seconds after that to return to normal, unless no one can see you when you fired. So, more on that in a minute. Number 5, Islands, the double-edged sword. So the best way to deal damage in the game is to steal it like a thief when no one can see you. One way to do this is an island, another is smoke. And to be really good at World of Warships, it helps to understand the dual nature of an island as kind of a wild card and as that double-edged sword. You need to be careful of gaps. The dangerous part about islands is that you can't see through them, obviously. What this means is if you're planning on sailing close to one, or God forbid between several of them, you better have a good idea where the torpedoes are on your enemy team. That said, your enemies can't see through islands either, and they definitely can't shoot through them. Sometimes getting in close to an island is a good idea because it can limit the number of people who can shoot at you, while you can still shoot at them. Like I said, World of Warships is maximizing the firepower your team can bring on one target while minimizing the number of targets that can be shot in return. Finally, consumables. These consumables are the ones that are going to really help you stay alive, so it's not going to be all of them. The first one we're going to talk about is smoke. This is going to increase your survivability basically by blocking vision and therefore making it harder to actually shoot you. There are actually a lot of creative ways of using smoke, but certainly it works as a panic button. Smoke is going to create a series of rings around you, one every few seconds. Now keep in mind, if you're moving faster than a dozen knots or so, you're going to run out of these rings as they're generated. Outrunning your smoke isn't really a problem if you're running away from an opponent, but if other boats can see you, if there's an aircraft overhead, or if somebody's using Hydroacoustic Search or radar in your area, then it's not going to do anything for you. Speaking of Hydroacoustic Search, I consider this mostly a defensive ability. You can use it for offensive purposes like trying to find ships in smoke, but for the most part, this is going to help you see torpedoes that are coming your way. That'll give you a little bit more time to actually start to turn or to change your speed. But more importantly, this is actually going to help your survivability for teammates, which should increase your survivability also, potatoes aside. The Damage Control Party. Damage Control Party is your way of making sure bad things happening to your ship stop. This means that if your turret is jammed or your ship is on fire, then you can make that go away. That's great, but it does have a reload time. Once you use it, it could be 30 seconds, could be a minute, could be more. And during that time, there's nothing you're going to be able to do to stop the bleeding. Now, there are a lot of people who will tell you, use this right away. Don't take more damage than you have to. This can work sometimes, but you probably want to consider all your options. If you're being spammed by a lot of high explosive shells, then you're likely to get caught on fire again, maybe several times in the next minute. If that's happening, then you probably don't want to use it. One fire takes off a little bit of your health each second, but you can be set on fire multiple times. Putting out one fire and then getting 2 or 3 more set is a terrible feeling because you're in a situation that's 2 or 3 times worse. Now you can't do anything about it. If you have a good idea that you might get hit by a torpedo, then you probably don't want to use your damage control either if there's just one fire on your ship. Uncontrolled flooding is going to take about 40% of your total health pool, in addition to the damage caused by the torpedo. The rule you'll hear from a lot of experienced players is don't put out one fire unless you know you're not going to be shot at for a little bit. Consider putting out 2 fires. Obviously, if you're going to die from burning, then this can kind of change your decision making, because there's no sense holding on to it when you're dead, and it's going to be something that you're going to have to hone in with experience. But you definitely do not want to always put out the first fire on your ship. Consider your options. Use your damage control party when you know it's safe, or you don't have a choice. And finally, the repair party consumable. So the repair party consumable is available mostly to battleships. This is going to allow you to recover some of the hit points that your ship has lost. But not all damage is treated equally when it comes to how repairable it is. Hits to your citadel are mostly not repairable. Hits to less vital parts of your ship are more repairable. And damage that you take from burning or flooding is 100% repairable. Now, this is up to the maximum per second that you can repair with the type of repair party that you have. So basically, my suggestion for using the consumable is you probably don't want to use this immediately either. You probably want to wait until you get to a point where you can't heal anymore with a single charge. And you'll notice how this works because there's going to be the white bar that's your hit points and a green bar that's just to the right of that that's showing you the amount that your repair party will repair. If they are both going down at the same rate, that's a pretty good indication that you're not going to be able to heal more with a single charge. You'll get a good feel for it after a couple of games in each ship. Also, battleship commanders, this is one reason that being caught on fire isn't totally bad, because as long as it doesn't get out of control, you're going to be able to heal that fire or flooding damage. Well, thank you everybody for listening. I hope this has been a little bit helpful for those of you looking to survive a little bit longer in World of Warships. I'll be doing a couple more of these videos. Please feel free to leave your comments in the comment section below. That's been helpful so far. I love the discussion. And I'll see you guys on the next one.